The drums that morning carried only one meaning. The king had chosen a wife. Everyone in the village understood what it meant the moment the sound echoed through the streets. Women stopped their work, men gathered in small groups, children ran from house to house spreading the news. It was a tradition older than memory. Whenever the king desired a new wife, the elders would present the most beautiful girl in the land, and she would be taken to the palace. No girl had ever refused. No family had ever questioned it. People believed the peace of the land depended on obedience. That morning, the royal messengers walked through the village announcing the chosen name. "Hear the king's decree," one messenger shouted loudly. "The great King Igwe Naji has chosen Amarachi, daughter of Okeke, to become his wife and queen." The news spread quickly, and within minutes, people were already rushing toward Amarachi's family compound. Her younger brother Chinedu arrived first, breathing heavily. "Amarachi!" he called. "Something has happened." Amarachi looked up calmly. "Why are you shouting like that?" she asked. Chinedu stared at her as if the words were too heavy to speak. "The king has chosen a wife," he finally said. Amarachi nodded slightly. "Then someone's daughter will enter the palace." Chinedu swallowed. "Yes, but the messengers are calling your name." Amarachi froze. "What?" "They said the king chose you," Chinedu replied. Before she could respond, loud voices approached. The royal messengers arrived with several elders following them. The taller messenger stepped forward and raised his voice again. "Amarachi, daughter of Okeke, step forward and hear the words of the king." Amarachi stood quietly. "I am Amarachi." The messenger nodded. "The king has chosen you as his wife. In 3 days, you will enter the palace and become queen." The crowd erupted with whispers and excitement. Some women smiled with envy, others shook their heads in amazement. Amarachi remained silent for a moment. Then she spoke calmly. "I will not marry the king." The words struck the crowd like thunder. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then voices exploded everywhere. "What did she say?" someone shouted. "Did she just refuse the king?" an elderly woman cried out. One of the elders pushed forward angrily. "Girl, watch your tongue." Amarachi did not move. "I said I will not marry the king." The messenger stared at her in disbelief. "You cannot refuse the king's choice," he said slowly. Amarachi looked directly at him. "I can. My life belongs to me." Her father Okeke rushed forward in panic. "Amarachi, do you understand what you are saying?" he asked in a trembling voice. "You are insulting the throne." Amarachi remained firm. "I am only speaking the truth." The elder woman, Mama Ijeoma, raised her hands in shock. "This girl will bring a curse upon all of us," she cried. "No woman has ever rejected the king." Another elder spoke with anger. "If the chosen wife refuses, the ancestors will be angry with the land." Amarachi's voice did not shake. "Then the ancestors should know that I did not ask to become the king's wife." The messenger's expression darkened. "You have 3 days to reconsider. If you refuse again, the elders will judge you before the whole village." The crowd murmured fearfully. Amarachi folded her arms. "My answer will not change." Just then, another voice spoke from behind the crowd. "Then you should prepare to speak those same words to the king himself." Everyone turned to see Obina, one of the king's trusted guards, standing there with a serious expression. He looked directly at Amarachi. "The king has heard about your refusal, and he wants to see you immediately." Okeke's face turned pale. "Please, she's just a young girl who does not understand what she's doing," he begged. Obina shook his head. "The king does not accept excuses." Amarachi stepped forward before anyone could stop her. "I will go," she said calmly. Chinedu grabbed her arm nervously. "Are you sure about this?" Amarachi took a slow breath. "Yes." Obina watched her closely. "You are walking into the palace of a man who is not used to hearing the word no," he warned. Amarachi looked straight ahead. then today he will hear it again. Obina studied her for a moment, then turned and began walking toward the palace road. Amarachi followed him without hesitation, leaving the crowd whispering behind her. No girl had ever walked toward the king like that before. And inside the palace, the aging king was already waiting, angry, curious, and determined to deal with the only girl who had ever dared to refuse him. By the time Amarachi reached the palace courtyard, word of her refusal had already spread among the guards and palace servants. People whispered as she walked past them. Some looked at her with shock, others with pity. Obina stopped in front of the large palace entrance and turned to face her. His voice was low but serious. "Before you step inside," he said, "think carefully about what you will say. The king is not a man who accepts shame easily." Amarachi looked straight ahead. "I did not come here to shame him," she replied calmly. "I only came to tell the truth." Obina studied her face as if trying to understand where her courage came from. "Many people think bravery is loud," he said quietly, "but sometimes it is simply refusing to be afraid." Amarachi gave a small smile. "Then today I will be very brave." Obina pushed the palace door open and announced loudly, "Amarachi, daughter of Okeke, has arrived." Inside the hall, elders sat quietly in a circle while the king sat on a raised seat watching her carefully. His voice was deep and slow when he finally spoke. "So, you are the girl who believes she can refuse the throne." Amarachi stepped forward and bowed slightly out of respect. "Great king," she said, "I did not mean to offend you." The king's eyes narrowed. "Yet you have done exactly that." The room became silent as the king stood up slowly. "For generations," he continued, "the most beautiful girl in the land becomes the king's wife. It is not only tradition, it is a sacred law that keeps peace in this land." Amarachi lifted her head. "With respect, great king, peace built on fear is not true peace." A loud murmur spread through the elders. One elder shouted, "This girl speaks too boldly." But the king raised his hand for silence. He walked closer to Amarachi and studied her face carefully. "Tell me something," he said. "Why would a poor farmer's daughter refuse a life of power, wealth, and honor?" Amarachi answered without hesitation, "Because none of those things belong to me if I am forced to accept them." The king stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed quietly, though there was no joy in it. "You are different," he said slowly, "but difference can be dangerous." Amarachi did not step back. "So can silence," she replied. The king's expression hardened. "You have one final chance," he said firmly. "Return home. Think carefully. In 3 days, you will stand before the elders. If you still refuse the throne, the council will decide your punishment." One of the elders leaned forward and spoke with warning, "And the punishment for dishonoring the king has never been light." Amarachi felt the weight of every eye in the room, but her voice remained steady. "My answer will still be the same." The king's eyes grew cold. "We shall see," he replied. Obina watched Amarachi as she turned to leave the hall, and for the first time something uneasy crossed his mind. Because if Amarachi truly refused the king before the elders, the entire village might soon face a judgment far worse than anyone expected. 3 days passed quickly, but the tension in the village grew heavier with each sunrise. Everywhere Amarachi walked, people whispered behind her back. Some looked at her with anger, others with worry, and a few with quiet admiration. No one had ever challenged the king's choice before, and the fear of what might happen next filled every conversation. On the morning of the 3rd day, the elders gathered in the village square to hear her final decision. The entire village came to watch. Amarachi stood before them calmly, while her father Okeke sat nearby with his head bowed in shame. Chinedu stood beside him, his eyes fixed nervously on his sister. The eldest of the council, Elder Ngwaka, raised his staff and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. "Amarachi, daughter of Okeke,
You were chosen by the king to become his wife. This is a sacred tradition that has protected this land for generations. Today, you must answer clearly before the elders and before the people. Do you accept the king's honor?" The crowd held its breath. Amarachi looked around slowly at the many faces staring at her. Then she spoke. "I